is Horror Sucks, podcast where we watch terrible horror movies so you don't have to. I'm Ashley Atkins, and I have no pets.
Hi, I'm Carter Rhodes, and my cat knows how to play fetch, and we did not coordinate that.
I did.
Oh, you cheater. And I thought that was spooky. I was like, oh my god. She must have seen my fact.
I did look. I had thought of something earlier today, and I completely forgot about it, which is disappointing.
So we did kind of just gloss over the fact that my cat can play fetch, but let's just lean into that. So today we are watching Sasquatch Hunters, and
we're going to tell you why it sucks.
And it does. So I commented when we first announced this movie a week ago that it was a red flag that they didn't have any like actual photos of Bigfoot from the movie in it. I was right. He's a goddamn man. He's a man in a gorilla suit. He's in a gorilla suit. That's all the special effects they had.
Okay, before we get into that, though, I think we need to also replay exactly what happened after last week's recording. So Carter had just gotten through talking about how excited he was that he owned the copy of Sasquatch Hunters and, like, this is the greatest purchase he's ever bought, the whole thing. Well, as soon as we finish recording, pack up, he opens it up to check out the disc, and the sleeve is empty. He bought an empty box. At Savers.
Yeah, with the Sasquatch Hunters cover art.
Yeah, it was very... I saw all the light just drain from his face go, what?
I was heartbroken.
But we'll get into more about why the gorilla suits later. Would you like to kick us off with the plot?
Yes, so...
Oh, wait, before we get into the plot, just for those of you who are new here, what we do is that we go through the plot of the movie, give you a high-level overview, and then we break it down in our segment called The Good, the Bad, and the Spooky, and then we give a rating. Neither of us knows what the other person is rating, and then we wrap it up. So, Carter, take it away.
Perfect. Somewhere in there, we'll throw in our overall impressions.
Oh, yeah.
They'll probably be clear, because I opened with, he's a man in a gorilla suit. So, since I didn't have the DVD, I had to find it online. I don't know how do I put this? The way I watched it was very legal, but I don't know if it was legal for someone to have uploaded it. It was on YouTube.
It did have a warning on it throughout the film.
Yeah.
Did you watch the YouTube or did you watch the other one?
I watched the one on Vimeo.
Okay, yeah. The one on Vimeo had warnings. I don't think the YouTube one did.
Yeah. Well, that doesn't mean it wasn't totally illegal for them to post it there. It just, every 20 minutes, there would be a thing that says, this is the property of TriStar Entertainment or whatever. Any unauthorized broadcast. It was... didn't feel legal. So
it honestly, though, fit in with the movie.
Yeah.
Like, it felt right.
So the one I watched came with about 15 minutes of trailers from like 90s, early 2000s.
Yeah, I skipped over those.
Shitty horror movies. Oh, I didn't. And I'm glad I didn't, because the first one was the trailer for the movie that we are talking about now. That did not make me feel confident going into the movie. They followed it up with a Michael Shannon horror movie, a horror movie with Willem Dafoe, Michelle Rodriguez, and Ray Liotta. Rest in peace. He just died earlier today.
Oh.
And then there was a trailer for The Grudge starring Sarah Michelle Gellar.
Nice.
Do you see a pattern?
Yes.
It's like everyone's dark past horror movie where they're like, oh my god, I can't believe I was in that trash. And also Sasquatch Hunters with no famous people in it.
No.
Kind of breaks the pattern. So the film opens with these three random guys just going hunting. They're shooting at something, and one of their buddies comes by and goes, would you keep your voices down? The park rangers will hear us. As though they couldn't hear the gunshots. So Bigfoot surprises them, and in a cold open first, kills two of them and lets the third one run away. So now it rolls the credits, and it's following this park ranger who recruits his loose cannon friend, Wild Bill, to help his team escort 3 researchers to a dig site where they had found remains similar to a gorilla in North America, which matched records from the 1890s. So they're like, "Oh, hey, maybe there's a gorilla from ye olde times here."
That didn't track for me.
So it's a total party of 8 people, and their names are like Helen Gilbert, Ethan Edwards, Louise Keaton. Just the most, not just white, but boringly white names you've ever heard.
The only person I can name by name is Janet.
Yeah, and Spencer.
Not even Spencer. Just Janet. The rest were so unforgettable. No, they were forgettable.
Yeah, it was Janet. I happen to know her brother, and then Wild Bill, just because his name is Wild Bill.
I didn't know his name was Wild Bill. Genuinely, in my notes, he is him.
So they're on the hike. They're talking about this gorilla, and Wild Bill, despite being a former park ranger, feels the need to keep weighing in and like interrupting the experts.
He also feels like he is babysitting these people and points it out multiple times.
Yeah. So ultimately the group stumbles upon some kind of a burial ground with a huge collection of bones, and they're all excited because they think the bones match the samples they received, and this is concrete evidence. While exploring, they find a dead bear draped over a tree. That's going to be important later. And Spencer just disappears from the group. They search for him for the rest of the day, and when they come back, the bones are missing and the graves have been filled in. So someone had been there. They wait for Spencer to return, and they start commenting that in a forest, the scavengers should have already been eating the bear, so there's just no animals nearby. They're looking for Bigfoot the next day, and Wild Bill is just fucking trucked by Bigfoot as he runs by. He looked like Marshawn Lynch. He just lowered his shoulder, put him on his ass, and just kept running.
We also shot him.
Well, as he fell, he fired the gun pretty much in the air, and he was like, Bigfoot must have ran away when he heard the gunshot. I was like, dude, you were just in his way. He knocked your ass over.
The lead into it, though, is like making him look like he was attacking, but then he just was like, JK.
Yeah, he was just full-on sprint out of there. I don't think he had any intentions of fighting.
No.
So they decide to pack up and leave, and they figure Spencer will either find his way back or something, but it's too dangerous to be there with the doctors and the researchers. So that night, Janet finds Spencer, but it turns out he's a trap that Bigfoot set up. It's just his body, and Bigfoot kills her, and in the chaos, the group split up. Several members are attacked, some are killed, and eventually they seek shelter in a nearby cabin. The cabin has a bunch of bear traps, so someone gets injured. And they discover that the cabin was where the person who found the Bigfoot samples from the 1890s had been living there and then killed by Bigfoots. I'm aware that the movie name is Sasquatch, but Bigfoot is just regionally what Ashley and I call it, and that's going to be a hard trend to break. So
yeah, Bigfoot and Sasquatch are the same.
Mm-hmm.
Bigfoot is just like the slang, and I have some fun anecdote from the director about that.
Okay, I'm almost done with the plot, don't worry. While at the cabin, the group pieces together that the Bigfoot has begun aggressively hunting them because they disturbed the ancient bones, and they can survive if they fully escape the territory, and Bigfoot just feels no need to chase them. While there, they comment that for a lot of apes, I don't know if this is factually true, but they say it is in the movie, they comment that a lot of apes will allow the big alpha ape to do the fighting unless it gets out of hand, and then multiple apes will join in. So by this point, there's only 4 people left. As they're running, they shoot and kill Bigfoot, and that's when just hundreds of Sasquatches come rolling out in the stupidest thing I've ever seen. They're all just men in gorilla suits sprinting.
It's my favorite scene.
and one of the Bigfoots...
Very Twilight running through the woods.
One of the Bigfoots grabs the, like, I don't know what to call her.
Her name was Helen.
Helen, thank you. So one of the Bigfoots grabs Helen and, like, drags her away. So Wild Bill's like, I can't leave a man behind. By the way, he also had, like, this whole tragic backstory of, like, he's a fucking park ranger. How tragic can your backstory be? Anyway, he tracks down the Bigfoot who has Helen and shoots at it. And it sees him and throws Helen at him in the worst CGI I've ever seen in my entire life. She lands on him, they get up and run away. And then
she does not land on him. She lands through him because she was actually a projection.
Yeah, and then they expect us to believe he caught her. It's like
it was so funny.
So they escape, and the movie ends with a shot of Bigfoot burying their fallen friends. And that is the plot of Sasquatch Hunters.
All right. So just some cool facts. I will preface, I don't have a lot because no one cares about this movie enough to make a Wikipedia for it.
There's nothing online.
No. So the film is directed by Fred Tepper, who is noted. He has actually quite a few credits for
special effects.
Yeah, special effects. Visual effects.
Right.
The most notable is Titanic, but a few other honorable choices was Nim's Island, and I forget the rest. But there's a lot.
There's another big one that I can't remember.
I can't remember it. There's quite a few big ones. I just didn't write them down. But the executive producers are Sylvia Tepper and Erwin Tepper. And we don't know for certain, but we believe that that's probably Fred's parents and that they funded this film.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
They were mentioned in the same, like, executive producers, Sylvia and Erwin Tepper.
Yeah. I could not find how much the budget was for this film, but I'm very, very curious.
Luckily, we know what the box office was.
Oh, what was it?
$3.99.
Oh.
However much I paid for that DVD. That's,
I
I'm
see.
sure the only thing they sold.
Tepper also was a producer for on Army of the Dead, which we've seen.
Oh, the Sam Raimi film?
Yeah.
Yeah, I liked that quite a bit. Fun fact about that movie, which is way more fun than any of these facts, they wanted to call that Medieval Dead.
Yes. Our favorite movie.
I really wish they did. That would have
been so much better.
We cheered in one of the beginning scenes where someone threw his chainsaw down.
It was
and he,
so good.
Plugged his stump into it midair. It was awesome. I recommend Evil Dead.
Is that a horror movie?
Yes, but it's good. So we're gonna be hard pressed to actually be able to review it.
Maybe I'll convince you.
Yeah. If you guys want it, we'll do it.
Please write in. Someone start a petition. Another fun fact is that during the casting, there was just an actress came in and made a comment that she was really impressed with them because they didn't ask her to take off her shirt in the audition, and every audition she goes to, they do. And she didn't get the role, but it was very memorable for them.
That's gotta sting.
She really appreciated them for it.
This was like 2005. This was 2005. This is not like 80s Coke party Hollywood. I don't know how.
I don't know. I do have some facts about Sasquatch because there's nothing on this movie. So Sasquatch is it is Bigfoot. I got Carter a sticker that says Bigfoot has my beer. Or Bigfoot stole my beer. I also have that sticker. If you go to Portland, Maine, they're there.
The Cryptid Museum, right?
They weren't at the Cryptid Museum, but like that's why they had the stickers.
I recommend the Cryptid Museum. Just check out their shop because there's so many cool shirts. The
shop is so good.
I get choice paralysis. I want to buy a shirt from them, and I'm just too torn on what to get because they're all so good.
I know which shirt I want, so... So Sasquatch is basically the North American Yeti. It's like been seen in like the central north of the U.S. and
Pacific
like...
Northwest is, I believe, the term.
Okay, sure. And also in Canada. The first sighting was in 1811 by someone whose name is not important. But then if you want to know more about Sasquatch, you should listen to the podcast Astonishing Legends. They do I want to say it's a 3 or 4 part series about the Patterson Gimlin film, which is a film from the 60s that someone captured of Sasquatch, which I say in air quotes. I've seen it. It looks pretty believable, but it also could be fake. They go through and like talk about all the debunkings and everything about it, but they also give some good Sasquatch facts.
If this is the film I'm thinking of, where it's just a clip of some, so if you correct for the camera shaking, it looks like just a man in a gorilla suit walking down the street. It just is not convincing.
Correct. So the thing is, like, someone has come forward and said it was them, but people have analyzed it and they're like, no, it can't be. And also the guys who took the guy who took the film, I want to say it was Patterson. They had no idea if someone was in a costume or not. Like, if someone could have been playing a prank on them, but they didn't know, so they fully believe it. And I think that's part of what is so, like, astounding about that film. But yes, Astonishing Legends.
Mm-hmm.
Great podcast in general. Great coverage on the Patterson Gimlin film. Okay. And that's all I got for facts. Yeah, not much here. I didn't want to get too deep into Sasquatch.
It was really hard to find stuff on this movie.
There's nothing. It was made in 2005. Came out in 2005, I mean.
Mm-hmm.
That's it.
So...
Oh, do we want to go through the cast? Does it matter?
No.
Okay.
There's no one, literally no one that you would recognize.
No.
There was one person who was on House for like 3 years.
There was one person who was in The Mummy, but...
Yeah.
I don't know.
No one is recognizable or famous enough to merit
Sorry,
a shout
guys,
out.
if you're listening.
So it sounds like we are ready to go into the good, excuse me.
We're going to kick it off with the bad?
Well, that's going to be the majority of this episode.
It always is.
But yes, I think we're ready for the good. Dun dun dun. Okay, so what I would like to start us off with is the music. It was incredible. It was done by William Stormberg. I have not been able to find any mention of him online.
So he's done like a few other like similar type movies where like bad horror movies, but that's pretty much it. The music is really good on its own.
The opening scene, not the opening scene, the credits, I suppose, the title screen, that's what I'm thinking of. After the cold open, it's doing the title screen, and the music is just absolutely beautiful. It's this shot, it's a bunch of shots of the forest and a lot of orchestral music. It was beautiful.
So the music gave me, I don't know, I mean, I do know why. It reminded me very much of Jurassic Park.
Mm-hmm.
It's just like a strong orchestral ballad that just was like adventure. You got the vibe.
I didn't write it down, but I thought the same thing. I get Jurassic Park vibes from it. Mm-hmm. And it's not just because of the Jeep, although it might be because of the Jeep. So, yeah, the music was just fantastic. No notes. It was great. It didn't always match the mood of the movie, but that was the movie's fault, not the
I was going to say, so I did put the music in the bad for mine, but not because it wasn't good music. It's because it didn't match.
Yeah.
But
I think that's on the director. Just don't put the goddamn music in if it's not a fit.
Okay, one thing I want to say is I did write this before I got to the end of the movie, but I really liked that we didn't see Sasquatch until the very end, like in full. Like we saw bits of it and stuff like that. We got that one glimpse of him running away, and that was like kind of where it starts to devolve. But leading into that, it was very good encrypted, but I also realized that that's just because the suits were so bad.
So I have that actually on my bad list, is because a lot of movies have been able to shoot around stuff like that and be good. This movie did not. It wasn't, you could feel the absence. Like Jaws, for example, you don't see the shark until 1 hour and 20 minutes into the movie, and he's only in the movie for a full 4 minutes. Or, excuse me, he's only on screen for 4 minutes. And you, at no point do you feel like, why am I not seeing the shark? Spielberg does an incredible job of giving you a sense of where the shark is and what it's doing without having to show it to you. This movie did none of that stuff. I'm going to talk about it in a little bit, but it was just, you could feel there should have been something there that they couldn't show you because of budgetary restrictions.
Okay, that is a good point.
Mm-hmm.
And I would like to follow up and say I don't think they did it well. I just liked the idea that we didn't see Sasquatch until the end.
Okay.
It had the opportunity to build suspense while I was half watching it.
One thing they did well is that, to your point, they mentioned that there were no animals around in Bigfoot's territory, and then they commented that they couldn't hear any crickets all of a sudden. And that was like the warning sign that Bigfoot was coming, is even the insects knew to leave. And I thought that was straight out of Jaws, just such a clever way of saying it's approaching without showing Bigfoot. But they didn't do anything with it. That would have been such a creative thing of just silence falls over everyone. It would have been so cool.
It falls flat.
Mm-hmm. So that's mostly what enraged me about this movie. Is they hit gold there and then they just stopped digging.
Hey, why stop when you got it already?
There was some cool old, not references, but it drew upon some older movies which I liked. Like there was an Evil Dead style Bigfoot cam from his point of view.
I loved that.
I like the creativity of it. And then there was another shot that reminded me of something from The Shining, where it was just this shot of the forest and it just slowly zooms in and it just really doesn't stop. It just zooms way into the forest. I liked that.
I also had that like scene where it was like from their perspective on Mike Good. I thought it was interesting, although I think rethinking it too, it's also my bad because it just doesn't line up with some of the characteristic they gave the Sasquatch, because it looks like they've got bad eyesight. So I am confused.
I did notice that. It was particularly bad.
Yeah.
So it gave off the vibe that it couldn't see well.
Which leads me to my next thing, which was that I kind of liked the idea of giving Sasquatch like a sort of community or cognitive thought.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I guess they personified it,
mm-hmm.
and which, I mean, it is an animal, but I don't know, they gave it some more sophisticated mannerisms, which was interesting, but at the same time, it's also on my bad list.
Their take on Bigfoot was pretty good. I liked it. They showed him as like, they have these rituals that they do after they die. They have quote unquote sacred ground. He had kind of primitive logic, but it was still quite clever. I really did enjoy their take on Bigfoot. It wasn't just like giant gorilla man in the woods and then they didn't think any further than that. They really asked themselves, what would Bigfoot living here look like?
Oh, I thought you were going to say, what would Bigfoot do? And that's going to be our next shirt design once we finalize these.
Overwhelmingly, dialogue is on my bad list, but a couple of characters did have some good comebacks. Yes. Like, one guy struck out chatting up this girl, and he turns around, his sister's just standing there staring at him, and he goes, nice tent, and she goes, nice face. And then another one where they're talking about the museum records from the 1890s, and the guy goes, Wild Bill goes, they kept things that old? And he goes, the museum keeps everything. It's kind of like a museum. There was some kind of good snarky one-liners, but overall the dialogue sucked.
Yeah. One thing I really liked was the scene where Helen gets taken. She doesn't just get taken. Sasquatch picks her up and throws her over his shoulder, or over its shoulder, and it's just like, but it's a dummy. And you can tell it's a dummy, but it looks so funny. Because it's just like this limp person. That made me crack up.
So I've said everything I had good to say about this movie.
Yeah.
Literally every good word I have about it.
There's not
finished.
much.
I sped through that fast.
Listen, it was like pulling teeth trying to find stuff. So let's move on to the bad.
I have so much bad that I have essentially chapters in my notes.
Good lord.
And chapter 1 is the special effects. In some scenes, we talked briefly about this, about how for budgetary reasons, some movies can't show like the big bad, and they have to get clever and creative about it. For Evil Dead, for example, this might have been in the script to begin with, but they showed, instead of showing like a demon thing, they showed it from the point of view of the demon, so they didn't have to shoot it. It's just flying around the windows. This movie doesn't do that. There's very clearly an absence where props need to be. Like, there's some scenes where characters are like, come look at this, and they all lean over and are looking at something, and the camera never shows it. Clearly there's nothing there. It's horrible. I mentioned that Bigfoot is literally a man in a gorilla costume. I feel like you guys cannot picture how silly he looked.
It looked real bad.
There was the worst CGI I've ever seen in my entire life when he like threw the JPEG of Helen at Wild Bill, and Wild Bill had to pretend to catch the JPEG.
And then they flash to where they're laying on top of each other.
Yeah. And then one last thing, as far as special effects go, I mentioned in the cold open, they let one guy escape. So Bigfoot chases him down for like half the movie is just cutting to this guy running through the forest.
It's like pretty early on that Bigfoot attacks him.
Well, it's early in the movie, but it takes a while for him to actually kill him.
I guess so.
Consider that this movie's 88 minutes long.
That's a good point.
It is not. They do not have the room to take their time. So anyway, Bigfoot catches him. He grabs him. And the camera cuts to a different shot of Bigfoot holding what is clearly a dummy. Clearly like a scarecrow dummy. He swings it almost lazily, bashes the guy's head against a tree, leaves the tiniest little smear of blood on the tree, and then just like full-on empty palm drops him and goes about his day.
Okay, but also like this guy looks completely mauled when he's just on the ground. Like, the way he swings him to was genuinely hilarious because he just was like, grabbed a limb. Didn't he grab him by his feet?
Yeah. He picked him up by the ankles.
And just was like...
It just...
It was genuinely really funny.
I finished my section on special effects. Do you?
Yes. The gunshots, those were special effects, and I hated it.
I actually tucked that chapter under sound design.
Okay, but the lighting for the gunshots was bad.
Oh, which would you rather talk about, lighting or sound design? Because I have chapters on both.
All right, we'll get to those later then. I think that's all I have for the animation. At one point, Bigfoot was animated as well.
Yeah.
They, like, tried to add animation to him, and all it did was like blur the figure, and it just looked so stupid. Oh my god.
So the sound design, like we talked about, was absolutely terrible.
Oh my gosh, yes.
There were certain characters, especially Bill, who was constantly peaking and sounded really compressed.
Yeah.
The guns, just the sound of the guns, they just sounded like pop, pop, pop. They just didn't feel like people were shooting guns.
Mm-hmm.
And at one point, it didn't even line up with what was on screen. You would see a flash, and then you would hear pop.
Yeah. Oh my god, it was so bad. My issue was the noises that Sasquatch makes, that Bigfoot makes, because they're not consistent. They are all over the place. Mm-hmm. You get some really loud, like, Wookiee kind of call, and then you get, like, these snarlings, but they don't sound similar. They're not... I would not say any of these animal noises that they took from were of the same species. Which, I mean, yeah, it's a Bigfoot. Like, we don't know what it sounds like.
It doesn't exist, yeah.
But also,
At
like,
the risk of alienating any viewers from the Pacific Northwest, we are agnostic towards Bigfoot. He might exist.
I'm a believer. I don't know what you're talking about. Anyways though, like I would feel like he'd have at least like a, what's the word I'm thinking of?
Consistent call.
Yeah, the noises he would make would be consistent to the other noises he makes.
They wouldn't sound so crazy different, yeah.
Yeah. Also, the other thing too is like certain sounds were much closer than other ones, and I think they were trying to portray that there were more than one, but it just did not sound good because you get like this snarling that was really right up close to the sound, like really loud, and then you get like these other sounds that were further away, but they all sounded like, they didn't sound like multiple, they sounded like the same.
The characters are insanely unmemorable. It's nuts. They at a certain point, all the Rangers are wearing the same uniform. They all have the exact same dark hair and the same haircut. I could not tell them apart except for Janet.
Why do you think she's the only one I remember?
Yeah.
The characters were bland. They had nothing to them. Like, I couldn't even tell you really their names besides Janet and Helen, I guess.
And Wild Bill.
Listen, I did not know Wild Bill's name until you told it to me on this show. You heard it here first, people. Like, I could not. They spent a whole scene introducing each person, but they did not give clarity of really who was who in this introduction scene. That was wasteful. That pissed me off.
They like, we're all by the cars, and it's like, they're like, Helen, meet Bill so-and-so. Bill, meet Ethan. Ethan, Luis, Brian. And like, every single time Bill would introduce himself, it was like watching people actually meet each other. It was just so uninteresting.
Yeah, oh man, it was rough. It was not good. But it also was like, it wasn't helpful either. It really pissed me off.
Because they weren't memorable enough to remember them. It's just, oh, this guy is a professor. All right, I can't really divine anything. There's a lot of creativity you can do with the same outfit, too. Is like, Spencer supposedly was the next great ranger. He had a lot of promise. Maybe he's got like his tie tight and his uniform's perfect. And then Janet's maybe a little bit of a mess because she's the younger sister. You can convey so much, and they just didn't. Everyone looked the same.
Also, speaking of Janet and Spencer, let's talk about them, because they're on my bad list.
Yes. Janet was at this bizarre age where she was younger than Spencer. Spencer's explicitly said to be 30 years old. And so Janet is his younger sister and has this, like, crush on Bill. And it's this weird line between childhood obsession and, like, actually being into him that made me super uncomfortable.
Well, it also made me super uncomfortable because she acts like she's 16.
Yeah.
Even though she's probably, what, at minimum 18, 20?
Yeah.
Probably.
At the youngest, she's in her 20s.
Assumption is that she's probably around 25, but she acts like a child. And she's like, she goes up to Bill and she's like, did you like my tent? It was really good. I had the best one. And it was like, why are you like this?
She's talking to her 30-year-old brother because he's like, nice college babes. And she's like, ugh, Mr. Raging Hormones. I'm like, Raging Hormones? What is this? Big Mouth?
Yeah, but then he got back at her because as soon as Wild Bill showed up, she was like, oh, who's this hunk? And he was like,
she says, who's this stallion?
You're right. And the brother's like, what? He said something also about hormones. I think he
he's
just
like,
repeated.
well, who's Raging Hormones now?
Yeah. At first, their dynamic was really annoying. It got somewhat better at one point, and then it got back to really annoying.
Yeah.
My issue with Janet, though, was like, so I was not actually with her. When Spencer goes missing, Janet starts freaking out that he's missing, and she's like, he's dead. Like, I just have to accept that fact.
She gave up so fast.
She did, but also, like, and everyone is like, dude, relax. Like, we're gonna find him. Like, not a big deal. He's fine out there. And she's like, no. And honestly, though, I think her reaction was pretty justified. Yeah. I'd be that upset if I lost my brother in the woods with Bigfoot running around killing people.
They didn't know Bigfoot was there yet.
You're right. But still, it was pretty scary. If I went camping with my brother, which I never will, and he just didn't come back from doing a perimeter, I'd be like, where the fuck is he? Like, where the heck is he? I need to find him. I would lose my shit too. I think I would have myself a little more put together because she acts a little
distraught.
She acts a little too distraught in terms of she acts more like a damsel than someone who's goal-oriented to find their sibling. Mm-hmm. But everyone downplaying him being missing I thought it was ridiculous.
In general, the characters are just morons. Like, they'll be like, okay, everyone, we gotta stick together, and then they'll spread out. They're like, shh, don't talk so loud after they just fired a whole bunch of guns.
Yeah.
The dialogue was terrible. They would say stuff like, are we ever gonna be even? It's like, yeah, you owe me. No, because remember you and the thing with the whole... That word for word. That last sentence, that's a line from the movie. He goes... You and the thing with the whole ... At some points, when people were talking, it came off like predictive text on your phone, where they were only replying to the last thing someone said, where it's like, do you think we're going to survive Bigfoot? Yes, I do. Oh, okay, do you? Yeah. Is like, very quickly they stopped actually talking and were just replying to what each other said. And then Wild Bill... Last thing I have to say about the characters, Wild Bill's archetype was the dumbest thing I've ever seen. Like a tortured park ranger who's like, I just couldn't live with myself after those people died in the forest fire. I'm like, I don't know, man. You're a park ranger. Your job is to prevent nature from killing people because nature's really good at killing people. This isn't like, I don't know. This it happens. Like, it's not your fault. It's really hard to keep people alive.
My only other comment about the characters was that there was a lot of sexism, which, I mean, it's a horror movie, it happens, but also it was just like, but it was oddly placed. And also, what really pisses me off is just all the women put up with it. Yeah. Like, the Janet and her brother would like put her down constantly and she was just like, whatever. And that was Spencer also the one hitting on the blonde chick?
I honestly don't know because the Rangers all dressed the exact same.
Well, one of the Rangers was hitting on the blonde chick who is the photographer college student.
Luis. I have stuff to say about the photographer later.
Okay. But he walked up on her taking a shower and he was like, oh, you need any help? I could wash it. And she's like, I already washed there. And at first she's like giving him sass and then he takes off and then she just kind of smiles to herself. And I was like, no.
It was pretty assaulty.
Yeah.
Like, I was gonna offer to do your back. She's like, I'm good. He goes, or your front. She's like, I'm good. And he's like, are you sure?
Yeah, and she's like, get lost. And then he leaves, but then she just kind of smiles and like giggles to herself like a little girl.
It was clearly what someone who believes in Bigfoot thinks women like to hear.
Yeah.
So there was some really just poor storytelling in this movie. Like when Janet and Spencer are killed, as the team starts to regroup, like every person has to be broken the news that Janet and Spencer are dead. Like, the doctor comes back, he goes, is everyone okay? They're like, no, Janet and Spencer are dead. The next ranger's like, I followed the sound of voices. Is everyone okay? Janet and Spencer didn't make it. I'm like, we get it. Please. Just have one conversation.
From a normal perspective, like, yeah, that's exactly what would happen.
Yeah.
But from a movie perspective, we don't need to hear it 5 times.
Yeah. And then there's one scene where Luis is separated from the group and she has only her camera and she's using it to light the way by taking pictures, and then flash would light up where she was going. And this is a full year after Saw did that, and I don't even know if Saw was the first movie to do that shtick, but they built up so much. It's unbelievable. There was 3 separate cutaways from people talking to her navigating the forest, taking photos. It would cut back to her with nothing exciting happening until finally she takes a photo and Bigfoot's there. And it's the worst photo you've ever seen in your entire life. No one would ever believe it was actually Bigfoot.
No. It looks like a man in a mask.
Yeah, a girl mask, yeah. I have one more chapter to talk about why this is bad.
Great.
Do you have anything else?
I think it has to do with the same thing that you're going to say, but I will say I have it on my list twice because that's how bad it was.
The lighting?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. So the movie takes place mostly at night. They had what appeared to be absolutely no professional lighting, nor any amount of talent to make it look like professional lighting. The movie was just silhouettes for like 3/4 of the movie. It was miserable.
Barely get silhouettes. It's just dark.
Yeah.
It's just dark. It's so bad. There were some points where like they were using flashlights and I liked it, but for the most part, like I was looking at a black screen the whole time and I was like, why am I here? Those are the points I hated.
I actually have the flashlights explicitly mentioned on my bad list because they were the only thing that was lit up. And it wasn't like a wide enough cone that you could see what they were looking at. So they were like, oh my God, look at these footprints. And you're just looking at dirt. And you're like, oh, okay, footprints, sure.
No, it was bad.
There was one scene where Bill was holding a gun. And as he walks, it like catches the moonlight. And that is all you can see is pitch black and then the light reflecting off of his gun. It's not even amateur. It's bad.
Yeah.
It's like if you tried to make a poorly shot scene. Every part of it was bad. It gave me a headache looking at it.
The whole filming at night thing was obnoxious. It really, really got me down.
It like that is an absolute non-negotiable no for this movie. We just don't have enough to elaborate on. It's so unacceptable. It's like if you sat down at a movie theater and it played nothing for 2 hours and then rolled credits, is you can't elaborate on that to your friends. It's just not okay to have in a movie.
No. It was honestly really distressing. I've said the same thing over and over again because I have nothing else to say.
There's like a montage of them walking through the forest, and it's just a bunch of really uninteresting scenes of people walking through nature, which comparatively is not that serious, but it's just lame filming.
It was so lame.
Yeah.
I think that is the best way to describe it.
It happened like 3 separate times. Every day they showed a new walking montage.
And it was like with the Jurassic Park style music playing, and it just honestly was looking back, it's kind of humorous, but like in the moment you're like, what is this?
And then the last thing I have to say for the bad, it's still with camera work in general, is there's one scene where the 4 survivors all go back to back as the Bigfoots are surrounding them. And as the camera changes, you can see every single male survivor has a bald spot. And they just can't stop showing it. It's distracting.
Didn't notice that. So, I have one more thing to add for the bad.
Okay.
So, I already brought this up in the good, was that, like, they give Sasquatch some human thought. The problem is, though, is that all of Bigfoot's actions and also its eyesight are very animalistic and not good. And it really just, I have a hard time believing that, they have sacred burial grounds, but also they just whipped a guy against a tree.
He disturbed the sacred burial grounds.
How would they know? They can't see very well.
Yeah, it's bad.
I would also have a hard time believing that they would genuinely be that upset if you dug up their bones.
Wouldn't you be upset if someone went into your yard, dug up your dead, I don't know,
I'd be like, hey, don't do that.
Sibling, I guess.
I mean, yeah, but I don't feel like... I would feel it was more believable if they were hunting them just to kill them versus, the bone motivation.
Mm-hmm.
I found it a little...
Yeah.
I could see them getting upset and like chasing them away. I don't see them like tracking them down to kill them because they disturbed the bones.
Mm-hmm.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. So is that it for the bad?
That's it.
That I don't know the numbers, but that might have been our longest bad ever. And
I don't know. Scream was pretty long.
But we did not dilly-dally. We didn't have conversations.
That's
we
true,
breezed through this.
We really
had a lot to say.
You had a lot to say, which gave me a lot to piggyback on.
Yeah.
So now let's move on to
the spooky.
The spooky. So I this movie is not scary. It doesn't even have jump scares except for one, which is the only thing I can say is somewhat semi-spooky. It's they're walking through the woods at night, so we can't see anything, and he walks into a bear trap, and it like clamps down on his leg.
It bear traps him.
Do we see this? No.
Because it's pitch black.
Right. But potentially spooky. That's all I have.
I really liked, I mentioned earlier, when the cricket stopped when Bigfoot was nearby. I thought that was the perfect, like, he's approaching is just silence. I thought that was really clever. The idea of multiple Bigfoots, I guess, is vaguely spooky. And then, lastly, there was one scene where in the dark, I don't know if this was intentional or not, but you couldn't see anything. And then Bigfoot moved, and it was just like a shadow shifting, but you could tell something was there. It's entirely possible they intended for that to be a clear shot of Bigfoot and just had poor lighting, but...
Awesome. So before we get into our impressions and our ratings, I forgot to mention something for facts, which was that the director, Fred Tepper, gave an interview with this guy, and I forget his name. He's not important. But the guy is like... The interviewer... I'll stop calling him the guy. The interviewer is like super into Bigfoot, and he's like, "Oh, it's so cool that you made a Bigfoot movie. Like, I love Bigfoot. You must get a lot of girls." Basically, he's like, "If I were you, I'd be going into the bar, like telling everyone, all the girls that I made a Bigfoot movie." And Tepper goes, "Yeah, no, I don't do that." And he's like, "Why not?" And he goes, "You know, the bars that I go to, like, if I tell women that I made a Bigfoot movie, it attracts women that are into Bigfoot." And I think that's all he needed to say. But then the interview's like, "Nah, man, the bars I go to, the ladies are into it." And he's like, "Well, I guess I'm going to the wrong bars." Did you have a comment? Because there's more to this interview.
No, please keep going.
So then the interviewer brings up, he asks Tepper about, you know, the difference between calling them Sasquatch or Bigfoot. And Tepper like gets very serious about it, and he's like, so the original name of the movie was going to be Primeval.
Oh, I think yeah, the subtitle.
How do you pronounce it?
Primeval.
Okay, Primeval.
There's the subtitle is "The fear is primeval, the agony is real."
Yeah. So then they changed it to Sasquatch Hunters, and he was like, "Oh, why not Bigfoot? Like, wait, what do you call the difference?" And he's like, They're Sasquatch. Bigfoot is just like a dumb nickname." And he was like, so the interviewer goes, "Oh, well, do you think they'd be offended? Do you think Bigfoot would be offended being called Bigfoot?" And he goes, "Yeah, they're called Sasquatch." Like, he got very defensive over calling them Sasquatch versus Bigfoot. And I'm not doing a good job of explaining it, but it was pretty funny.
I can't imagine that Bigfoot cares a lot about the English word for him. No. I'm just skeptical that he speaks English. Like, how would you feel if Bigfoot was in this room, he leaned over to his friend and like grunted, and his friend said in English, "Hey, Ashley, that grunt is pretty derogatory." Would you care? Like, "Oh man, darn you, Bigfoot, don't you grunt like that. That noise means bad things to you, so don't do it."
Yeah, no, I really just got a kick out of how seriously he took his role as, yeah, the Bigfoot enthusiast is like, "Yeah," and he's like, "Why am I here?"
So that ties into one of the notes I had about this movie, which is that it is surprisingly passionless. You would think that someone who would make a movie about Bigfoot would be over the moon excited about it. But this movie's just so bland. Like, there's no excitement in it at all. It was clearly just a bunch of people doing their jobs to try to make a movie about it.
I think that's exactly how Tepper feels about this movie, based off those 2 questions I read from that interview.
Mm-hmm.
There's 3 parts. I didn't bother continuing.
So, overall, my notes on the movie is it's just a terrible production value to the point where it feels like a class production. I almost feel bad insulting it, because it does feel like talking about an 8-year-old school play, being like, garbage, I didn't believe any of their lines. It was just really terrible.
It was pitiful.
The dialogue and acting is bad. I don't always blame the actors for that. It's hard for even good actors to bring bad writing to life, and writing was bad. The actors didn't do it favors, but that might not have been their fault. And then anything and everything relating to the camera was god-awful. Anything that you could see was terrible. Anything you could hear was terrible. And
everything was terrible.
There are minimal special effects, and the movie makes no effort to work around it. It's like...
What surprises me is how awful the visual effects are, and yet Tepper is known for visual effects.
Yeah.
So, something's not reading.
It's like if you're watching, like, a period piece from, like, the Victorian era, and someone just walks in jeans. Is it just... The movie doesn't attempt to hide it or shoot around it. Is there just like, yeah, there should be something here. Well, fuck it. Who cares?
I don't know. This movie, yeah, there was a lot that left to be desired. Definitely a waste of time.
Mm-hmm.
Do not recommend watching this movie. We've told you all you need to know.
Yeah. The only redeeming quality about this movie is the concept, and it's because it's basically just Predator.
Yeah.
So,
genuinely.
For the Joseph DeStasio Memorial line, the line this week is, "Get to the Jeep!"
That's it?
Yeah, well, it's a Predator reference.
Oh, I see.
And it was lame, because it was at, like, the peak of the movie, and get to the Jeep is 1,000 times lamer than get to the chopper.
Yeah.
Which also... Get
It's
to the
still
chopper
a lame
wasn't...
coat.
Well, the line didn't wait for applause. Like,
No.
It was just a line in the movie that people liked. It wasn't like this where it's like, and now you can be happy we made a Predator reference. So my comparison for this movie is it's like a porn parody of something, except it's worse, and there's no sex in it. It's like every part of the movie feels like someone's like, no one's gonna care about this scene because they're gonna be watching for blank, except there is no blank. It's just every part of the movie is like, oh, but we'll make up for it with a different part, and it never does. It's just bad. Are we ready for our ratings?
I'm ready. Mine's not funny, so I'll go first.
Okay.
I gave it a 3 Bigfoot bones.
Okay. I gave it a $1 box office because this movie did not do well, and rightfully didn't. This is a 1.
Wow.
Yeah. And it feels like a cheap shot to be like, this bad movie is bad, but it is. There's nothing I can really latch onto and say, at least they did this right. Is the few things they struck gold with, they dropped immediately.
I don't know. I feel like it's gonna get worse.
Like I said, I'm not afraid to go negative. I'm ready to give it a 0, and I'm ready to give it a negative. If I want my time back, I'll give it a negative. I take that back, actually, because that implies I don't want my time back from this movie.
I definitely want my time back.
Yeah, this was bad.
Next week's movie.
Yes.
I'm very excited for this. We are going to be watching Leprechaun 5 in the Hood, starring the one and only Ice-T.
Holy shit.
Yes, I literally got so excited when I found this the other night. So you can get it. It's free with Amazon Prime, but you can, get it on YouTube, Google Play, Apple TV. And, oh man, I'm so excited.
We talked about it, and we decided that it makes the most sense to just watch Leprechaun 5 without seeing any of the previous Leprechauns.
Yeah.
So we are going to be as lost as you guys are. You don't have to feel pressured at all.
Is Leprechaun a series?
Yes.
Right, but is it like one that you need to watch all of them to understand? Jennifer Aniston is
Run,
the first one.
just run, run that sentence by again where you ask me if a horror movie based around leprechauns has a very important plot. I'm gonna roll the dice and say no. I don't think it's particularly important.
Well, so I've seen the trailer and it makes it seem like it's not important.
Yeah, I imagine.
The trailer is really good. I highly recommend watching. All right. Anything else we have to add for today?
I think that's everything.
Oh, I have some horror news.
Ooh.
I don't know.
I have no idea what she's gonna say. You guys are.
I saw a post online that they're coming out with a Winnie the Pooh based horror movie.
Oh yeah.
Called Blood and Honey, and it's about Winnie and Piglet going off on a killing spree or something like that.
Is that real? I just
Yes.
assumed that was fake.
No,
Oh my God.
it's real.
Holy shit.
I looked it up and there was like multiple news articles about it and like it's projected to release. So
Nice.
it's obviously not done by Disney, but
Well,
they
it's
are
public domain
yeah,
now.
Right. I was just gonna say they're public domain.
Mhm.
Get ready for us to cover that movie because Winnie the Pooh looks horrifying, and I cannot wait. That's my only piece of news.
Yeah.
Anything else?
I think that's everything.
All right.
I will be going camping this weekend, which means that I might have offended the Bigfoot gods, and I'm going to be torn apart and beaten to death by men in gorilla suits this weekend.
Hey, listen, if you find any bones and they don't look human, just leave them where they are.
Sounds like a plan.
All right. Well, if that's it, then thank you all for listening. If you enjoyed the show, please rate, review, and subscribe. We post every Wednesday. You can also find us on Instagram at Horror Podcast. And that's it.
All right. Stay spooky.
Horror Sex is brought to you by Wild Thing Media. Editing done by Carter Rhodes and production and music done by Ashley Atkins. Thanks for listening.